Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7 for this Wednesday, the 19th of February. I'm Douglas MacKenzie, bringing you news from Scotland and around the world. Tonight we have no guest in the studio with us, but let that not stop a conversation. We have accounts on Mastodon, on Blue Sky and on the other place, so please let's hear your comments on the stories which are making the news tonight. And you can tweet directly to or message directly to Broadcasting Scotland, or just use the hashtag Broadcasting Scotland on Blue Sky. We begin tonight with the update from Ukraine, as we always do, on this day 1092 since the full-scale invasion of the country by Russia. Following yesterday's talks between the USA and Russia, Donald Trump has come in for criticism and condemnation after he told reporters, "Today I heard from Ukraine, oh, we weren't invited." Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal. Russia and the US said they would establish negotiating teams and bring in European countries at some point. Sean Savette, who was National Security Council spokesperson under Joe Biden's presidency, said that Donald Trump had bought Putin's propaganda hook, line and sinker when he suggested on Monday that Ukraine had started the war with Russia. Savette added, "A reminder no one should need. Putin started the war by invading Ukraine unprovoked, and his forces have committed war crimes against the Ukrainian people. Russia is the party responsible for this war continuing." Trump said he would probably meet with Putin before the end of the month. Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince wanted Ukraine to take part in the talks in Riyadh, but the US and Russia refused. As those talks took place, China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi told the UN Security Council on Tuesday that China supports all efforts conducive to peace talks. The Chinese President Xi Jinping has set out 4 principles: respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity of all countries, observance of the UN Charter, due regard for legitimate security concerns of all countries, and supporting efforts towards a peaceful settlement. A Ukrainian drone squad knocked out a North Korean self-propelled howitzer in the Luhansk region, Ukraine's military said on Tuesday. The Hortitsia, or East Group of forces, said it was the first time since the start of the full-scale invasion, that a very rare North Korean M1978 Koksan howitzer had been hit by a Ukrainian drone. As well as Moscow using North Korean troops in the war, South Korean intelligence and other sources have reported that Kim Jong-un's regime is supplying the Koksan self-propelled artillery guns. French President Emmanuel Macron announced on Tuesday that he will host another meeting on Ukraine, quote, with several European and non-European states, after an emergency meeting on Monday in Paris that brought together a small number of key European countries in response to the US and Russia holding talks in Saudi Arabia without Ukraine and Europe. Russia said its air defences downed 21 Ukrainian drones in the space of an hour late on Tuesday, most over the western Kursk region and one over Crimea. Russia's claims could not be verified. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen said her government would announce plans today for a massive rearming of Denmark's military due to the threat posed by Russia. "We must upgrade massively to protect Denmark, and we must rearm massively to avoid war," Frederiksen told Parliament on Tuesday. Danish public broadcaster DR said the government was expected to announce the creation of a 6.7 billion fund for additional defence spending in 2025 to 2026. It would bring Denmark's defence spending to 3% of GDP. Denmark has been one of Ukraine's strongest backers. Moving on now to the Middle East. At least 48,297 Palestinians have been killed. and 111,733 injured in Gaza since 7th October 2025, according to the Gaza Health Authority. Hamas has said it is ready to release all its remaining hostages in a single exchange if the ceasefire agreement with Israel moves forward to a second phase next month. The offer came as the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, signalled his readiness to talk about a second phase of the Gaza ceasefire after an extended delay by appointing one of his closest advisors, Ron Dermer, a US-born cabinet minister and former ambassador to Washington, to lead the Israeli delegation to the talks. In the final steps of the first phase, Hamas will hand over the bodies of 4 Israeli hostages on Thursday, including those of 2 young boys from the same family. The group will release 6 hostages on Sunday and then transfer 4 more bodies next Thursday. That will complete the first 6-week phase of the ceasefire, due to end on the 1st of March, leaving a further 58 hostages in the hands of Hamas and allied militant groups in Gaza. Israel believes that 34 of the remaining hostages are dead. The agreed plan for the second phase was for hostages and bodies of the dead to be exchanged for Palestinian detainees and prisoners in staggered groups, but Hamas suggested on Wednesday it was prepared to accelerate the process. Israel's army's Jenin raid enters its second month, with mass displacement continuing in the West Bank. Thousands flee Jenin as Israeli army continues demolitions, making it the largest displacement in decades across the West Bank. After decades in exile, Syria's Jews visit Damascus. For the first time in 3 decades, Rabbi Joseph Hamra and his son Henry read from a Torah scroll in a synagogue in the heart of Syria's capital Damascus, carefully passing their thumbs over the handwritten text as if still in awe that they were back home. An Israeli military prosecutor charged 5 reservist soldiers today with abuse of a Palestinian detainee, saying it took place last year at a military base where thousands of Gazans have been held. The indictment accused soldiers at the Sidi Taman base in southern Israel of breaking the detainee's ribs, puncturing his left lung, and tearing his rectum. The detainee was identified only by his initials. To Scotland now, and First Minister John Swinney has vowed that he will take a collaborative approach to tackling the climate and nature emergency, and that the transition to net zero will abandon no community. Addressing key climate stakeholders at the Glasgow Botanic Gardens, the First Minister said that despite the many examples of government-supported actions and projects that are contributing to a more climate-resilient Scotland, there is much more to be done. He also called once again on the UK government to at least match the Scottish government's investment in securing a future for the Grangemouth refinery. The First Minister said, "This transition will abandon no community. The importance of safeguarding jobs and livelihoods has never been more stark than in the immediacy of the situation at Grangemouth. If we are going to ensure a future for the site, opportunities for its highly skilled workforce, investment is needed now. That is why yesterday I announced that the Scottish Government will amend the 2025-26 budget at this late stage to allocate an additional £25 million for a Just Transition Fund for Grangemouth. Today, I urge the UK Government to at least match our funding and to use the powers they have to go further. If this is a government for the United Kingdom, then Scotland should be getting its fair share of UK-wide investments." The First Minister added, "If we are to persuade people to back climate action wholeheartedly, we must speak not only of the costs and challenges, which there will be, but also demonstrate clear and direct household and community benefits where these are possible. Tangible benefits at home in terms of more jobs, lower energy bills, and new economic opportunities, delivering also tangible benefits for the planet. My approach to government has always been collaboration, which is why I want this to be the start of an ongoing conversation with a focus on action and on delivery. I believe that we can only make the progress and map out the next necessary steps on our climate journey by bringing together local and central government, agencies, stakeholders, trade unions, community organisations, and the wider public. The SNP has criticised the Labour Party, stating that families in Scotland are paying the price as UK inflation rises to 3%, with household bills expected to increase further in April. The rise in inflation has led to a surge in food prices, which have jumped from 1.9% to 3.1%. Essential items such as milk, coffee, tea, bread, meat, cheese, eggs, and even sugar and chocolate are now more expensive. This increase follows months of warnings from economists and businesses about the negative impact of the Labour government's budget and national insurance tax hike. Stephen Flynn, SNP Westminster leader, expressed concern, noting that the cost of living is rising, unemployment is increasing, and the UK economy remains stagnant. He argued that Sir Keir Starmer's promises to reduce bills and address the economic fallout from Brexit have not materialised, as energy and food prices continue to rise. Flynn further claimed that the Labour Party's decisions, including the tax hikes and staying out of the EU single market, are damaging the Scottish economy, costing the country billions in lost trade, growth and investment. With energy bills set to increase once again in April, the SNP is calling for urgent action to address the economic challenges and prevent further price hikes. The criticism comes at a time when many households in Scotland and across the UK are feeling the pressure of rising living costs. Scotland's Deputy First Minister, Kate Forbes, has demanded the repeal of the UK Internal Market Act and the full restoration to the Scottish Parliament of the powers that were removed by the last UK administration. In October 2023, the Scottish Parliament called for the Act to be repealed, but that vote was ignored by the previous UK government. The current UK government has now launched a review of the Act, but has said it too will not consider repeal. The Scottish Parliament today voted to reaffirm its opposition to the UK government's Internal Market Act. The Scottish and Welsh Parliaments refused to give the Act legislative consent, with Labour MSPs among those voting to repeal the Act in October 2023. Now that the Labour Party is in government in Westminster, their MSPs have U-turned and dropped their opposition to the Act. The Internal Market Act significantly undermines devolution and enables a UK minister to open up Scotland's NHS to so-called market access principles. Ms Forbes said, "It is baffling that the new UK government has explicitly ruled out repealing the Internal Market Act before it begins the review process and consultation. Neither the scope nor terms of reference of the review acknowledge the long-standing position of the Scottish Government and the Scottish Parliament to repeal the IMA. We still face the prospect of laws passed in this Parliament being nullified at the stroke of a pen by the UK Government. The very existence of such a risk diminishes the powers of this Parliament. This, therefore, is a key test for the new UK Government to show whether it intends to continue to ignore the democratic voice of the Scottish Parliament." Ms Forbes said that today was an opportunity for the Scottish Parliament to send a clear message to Westminster that it must change course by repealing the Internal Market Act. She said that the era of undermining Scottish democracy must come to an end. The UK Labour government's plans to prevent refugees who arrive through so-called irregular means from obtaining citizenship face a legal challenge, raising concerns about potential human rights violations. A 21-year-old Afghan refugee has brought a legal challenge against the UK government's new citizenship policy, which could prevent people who arrived by, quote, dangerous journeys from becoming British citizens. The Afghan man who arrived in the UK at 14 after fleeing the Taliban was granted refugee status and indefinite leave to remain. He was preparing to apply for citizenship when the new rules emerged, potentially impacting tens of thousands of refugees who arrived through irregular means. The changes outlined in government guidance would make it nearly impossible for refugees like him to meet the good character requirement for citizenship, regardless of how long they have lived in the UK or their conduct since arrival. Under the updated rules, those who enter the UK illegally would generally be refused citizenship applications, even if years have passed since their arrival and they have demonstrated good behaviour and integration into society. The Afghan refugee who has complied with immigration rules, has a clean criminal record, and aims to contribute to the UK economy as a mechanical engineer, argues that the new policy unfairly punishes those who had no choice but to enter the country irregularly. His legal challenge highlights concerns that the new rules breach the 1951 UN Refugee Convention, which prohibits penalising refugees for illegal entry and could violate the European Convention on Human Rights. Critics argue that the retrospective nature of these rules creates an unfair situation for refugees who have already built lives in the UK and undermines their basic rights to citizenship. These changes may also contravene equality legislation by treating refugees as second-class citizens, perpetuating the discrimination based on their method of arrival. Human rights groups have condemned the policy, warning that it represents a significant setback for refugee rights and could undermine the UK's international commitments. The case is set to set a precedent for how the UK balances national immigration policy with its obligations under international human rights law, particularly the protection of refugees. Life expectancy growth in Europe has slowed considerably since 2011, with England experiencing the steepest decline. A new study found that from 1990 to 2011, life expectancy in Europe grew by an average of 0.23 years annually, but this dropped to just 0.15 years between 2011 and 2019. England saw the most significant slowdown, with a drop in annual improvement from 0.25 years to just 0.07 years. Scotland, along with Wales, also experienced a slowdown, with life expectancy growth declining by 0.15 years. The factors behind this decline are concerning for public health. Experts point to rising levels of obesity, poor diet, and mass inactivity as the primary causes, with heart disease and cancer playing key roles in the stagnation of life expectancy. The trend has been particularly severe in the UK, where the impacts of austerity policies have limited funding for public health services, contributing to these worrying health outcomes. In contrast, some European countries like Norway, Iceland, Sweden, Denmark, and Belgium have managed to maintain or even improve life expectancy, aided by stronger government policies addressing obesity and promoting physical activity. These countries had fewer heart disease and cancer deaths, showing that proactive health measures can counteract the trend of declining life expectancy. Scotland's challenges have been affected by the decisions of UK governments, where the health system in England is increasingly under pressure due to underfunding and a lack of resources. Experts argue that austerity measures have exacerbated these health issues, undermining efforts to combat the root causes of poor health. The slow response to the obesity crisis and high levels of physical inactivity are not only shortening lives, but are also placing significant strain on the NHS. If the UK life expectancy is to improve, experts stress the need for stronger public health initiatives, including better access to healthy food and increased physical activity. Without these changes, the gap between the UK and other European nations will likely continue to widen, with long-term consequences for public health and well-being. Italy now, and in Italy, concerns over civil liberties have surged as the National Journalists Union has filed a criminal complaint after revelations that the government allegedly used spyware against critics and journalists. The Italian government is under intense scrutiny after it was revealed that government officials may have used military-grade spyware to target critics, including a journalist and a migrant activist. This revelation has sparked outrage over potential violations of civil liberties and has raised concerns about threats to press freedom. The spyware in question, graphite, is designed for criminal surveillance but has been allegedly misused against political opponents and members of civil society. The issue escalated when Italy's parliament, led by President Lorenzo Fontana, invoked a rule to prevent ministers from answering questions about the scandal. This move, which was seen as an attempt to suppress transparency, left many wondering whether the government was trying to conceal its involvement in these unlawful surveillance activities. The union representing Italian journalists, FNSI, has filed a legal complaint seeking clarity on the matter. The union expressed concerns that the hacking of mobile phones was not limited to just the individuals already identified, but could also have affected other members of the media and civil society. The FNSI has called for journalists to be allowed to perform their duties without the fear of being targeted by government surveillance. Government agencies have denied involvement in the illegal surveillance, though there are suspicions that the country's intelligence services use the spyware. The government's refusal to address the issue in Parliament has fueled accusations that it is eroding democracy by undermining oversight and accountability. Critics argue that this type of surveillance, particularly when used against journalists, constitutes an attack on press freedom and civil rights, potentially violating constitutional protections against unwarranted wiretaps. If the allegations are confirmed, this scandal could signal a dangerous shift towards authoritarian tactics and a serious breach of Italy's democratic principles, threatening the independence of journalism and the right to free expression. China now, and in 2024, clean energy contributed a record 10% to China's GDP, with electric vehicles, solar power and batteries driving the growth of the country's clean tech sector. China's clean energy sector saw impressive growth in 2024, contributing 10% to the nation's GDP, totaling 13.6 trillion yuan, $1.9 trillion. This marks a significant milestone, with clean energy now surpassing real estate in value. The surge in clean technologies, particularly solar power, electric vehicles, EVs, and batteries, is helping China transition to a more sustainable future while boosting its economy. Electric vehicles and their batteries emerged as the largest contributors to this clean energy boom, accounting for around 39% of the overall value. The rapid growth of these sectors has been a result of years of strategic investments by China, with a focus on improving energy security, reducing reliance on imported oil, and advancing the nation's environmental goals. The clean energy sector's growth also reflects China's broader environmental and economic ambitions. By developing its electric vehicle industry, China is positioning itself to lead in sustainable transportation, contributing to global climate efforts. This development not only aids in reducing China's carbon footprint, but also creates economic opportunities both local and globally. The country's significant investments in renewable energy, nuclear power, and energy storage align with its vision for a cleaner, more energy-efficient future, contributing to global environmental goals. As China looks forward to its next 5-year plan, experts remain confident that the country will continue to prioritize clean energy. Despite global uncertainties, including political changes in the US, China has made it clear that it will maintain its investment in clean technologies, seeing both environmental and economic benefits. The Scottish Government has committed to exploring the potential purchase of Ardrossan Harbour, in a move welcomed by local MSP Kenneth Gibson. Discussions on the improvement of the port have been ongoing for some time, with no agreement reached on the approach to be taken, causing huge uncertainty for the communities in Arran and Ardrossan. In response to a parliamentary question posed by MSP Kenneth Gibson today, Cabinet Secretary for Transport Fiona Hislop confirmed that she has instructed Transport Scotland and Caledonian Maritime Assets Limited to explore the potential purchase of Ardrossan Harbour to get the redevelopment project moving. Commenting SNP MSP, Kenneth Gibson said, "This is great news for Ardrossan and Arran. Many of the issues which have plagued progress on the redevelopment project have stemmed from private ownership of the port. Public ownership will strip away the red tape that has been holding back redevelopment for far too long, and the Cabinet Secretary is to be congratulated for breaking the logjam. We still need to see these talks reach a positive outcome with the current owners, Peel Ports, as well as North Ayrshire Council." Mr Gibson welcomed the announcement, which, combined with the confirmation that money has been made available in this year's Scottish budget, not only for the redevelopment of Ardrossan Harbour, but also for its potential purpose. Staying with the Scottish Government, and a campaign to increase awareness of tenants' rights was launched today by Housing Minister Paul McLennan. This includes information about where renters can go to access help and advice. Tenants in Scotland have some of the strongest rights in the UK, which include the right to ask for a review of a rent increase and for landlords to give the correct notice period before increasing rent, protection from illegal evictions or being asked to leave a property without proper notice, the right to a rented home that is maintained to an acceptable standard. Speaking on his visit to Citizens Advice Scotland in Edinburgh, Mr McLennan said, "People who rent their homes in Scotland already have strong rights when it comes to rent rises, maintenance and repairs and evictions. This campaign is important to make sure we increase awareness of these rights. We also want to highlight the end of the temporary change to rent adjudication on the 31st of March. This was put in place to support the transition back to market rent following the temporary cap on rents under the Cost of Living Act. Under existing legislation, most private tenants continue to have the right to seek a review of a rent increase, and I would encourage any tenant who is concerned about this to apply. We are also taking forward measures in the Housing Bill to address the need for longer-term action on rent control and to strengthen tenants' rights where it's needed." Now, news from the Universities of Glasgow and Strathclyde. Communities are to be encouraged to tap into and enhance their knowledge of languages in a project worth nearly £1.3 million, aimed at designing new approaches to learning about sustainability. The study at the Universities of Glasgow and Strathclyde will develop new creative learning approaches and resources for teachers, along with professional development opportunities to ensure that pupils can fully contribute to their communities. It will focus on multilingualism, encouraging pupils and their families alike to share their knowledge of languages, including those who have home languages other than English. The project will explore this approach to learning from the perspective of permaculture, a philosophy based on using resources in a sustainable manner. Pupils will have the chance to create art-based activities depicting the project's aims, under the guidance of local artists, with a view to, for example, staging an exhibition. 3 primary schools, Thornwood in Glasgow, Cradle Hall in Inverness, and Bowhouse in Grangemouth Falkirk, are participating in the first phase of the 3-year programme, with plans to expand it to another 10 schools in later phases. The study has received funding of nearly £1.3 million from the Arts and Humanities Research Council, part of UK Research and Innovation, UKRI. The funding has been announced in advance of International Mother Language Day, which takes place on the 21st of February. The UN General Assembly has declared 2022 to 2032 the International Decade of Indigenous Languages as part of a strategy to mobilise global efforts to preserve and revitalise Indigenous languages and knowledges. The project is informed by the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, to which Strathclyde and Glasgow are both signatories. Well, that's it for this evening's Shortened Scotland at 7. Before I go, I just want to remind you that at Broadcasting Scotland, we depend on the generosity of our supporters. To everyone who has donated, and to everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment, thank you very much. We raised £20,000 from April to the end of 2024, £16,000 short of our £36,000 target. We had to borrow £12,000 to enable us to pay our bills and survive. But the pressure is still on, and we need to find enough regular donors to give us financial security. We face costs of over £4,000 every month, but only receive donations of around £2,500. We need more regular subscribers, but we need to clear our debts as well. Our programmes will always be free to view. However, if you can afford £5 a month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter, and please donate whatever you can afford. So thank you very much for watching wherever you are, whether it's on live or catch up. Please join us again tomorrow, where we will have live coverage of First Minister's Questions and our usual episode of Scotland at 7 in the evening. Please, as I mentioned at the beginning, make your views on the station, on the news, what should be covered, what shouldn't be covered, via Blue Sky, using our hashtag. So, thank you very much. Goodbye. Thank you for watching, and from me, good night.